everybody. We are so glad you are with us tonight for our next session of Vertical Parenting. We are already into week 4 and excited to have Heather with us tonight, of course. And our youngest son, Truett, is with us tonight. So you'll get to hear from him some stories of his memories of life and stories about life now in a very different season for us. We've been talking about 7 essentials for building a family that loves and believes. And we continue that tonight with our 4th lesson called Celebrate and Enjoy Every Season. And that's so important because childhood and parenting has seasons to it. And if you understand the seasons, it can help you as you process through them. Just like in our world, we have been given seasons by God. The scripture tells us in Genesis 1:14 that he has put the moon in the sky or in orbit around us so that we might have, along with the sun, day and night, and for signs and seasons, and for days and years. So as we understand how God has designed life for us in seasons, we can understand also that he's designed seasons for us as we go through our life and through parenting. So we are now here in Texas in what should be the springtime, but it's been in the 30s lately, so it's a little unusual. So sometimes, as we'll discover tonight, the transition from one season to the next can be a little awkward at times. Seasons all have purpose, and when you understand each season, they can be a real joy. If you understand the purpose of springtime, you can get outside and enjoy and be a part of all that's happening. If you get to enjoy the beginning of what should be baseball season, and if you understand the season of summer, you spend a lot of time outside. And if you're in Texas, you make sure your house air conditioning works. Mm-hmm. So every season has purpose, every season has joy to it, and every season has a time of change and transition. So we think about our family. We've been through a lot of different seasons. There was a very short season that Heather and I were married with no children. It was a very short season. And then we began a 10-year season in the 90s of having children, and we did. All of our children were born in the 90s, and that was a season for us, and it was filled with smaller seasons within. So Truett came last in the group. In 1999, he was born. So I'm going to let Heather talk for just a moment and have her describe to you a little bit about what we were going through at the time, what season we were in. So tell everybody the season of life we were in when Truett was born to us.
All right. Well, Truett, he was born at the end of the decade. And we were about to enter into a new decade. He was born in October. And we had 4 young children at home. We had just moved here to Ovilla. And let's see, our youngest at the time she was only 17 months old. So they were pretty close together. And our oldest was 9. And let's see, we were remodeling the house, so lots of activity, lots of busyness. Brian was working at the church, and it was a fun and busy and crazy season.
Yeah. So that's what Truett was born into. Mm-hmm. This is how he saw life. This is all he ever knew of life with 6 other people in the house. A very different experience than, say, Brianna, born into a home with just Heather and I there. Mm-hmm. So, of course, time has changed. Here we are at a point when Truett has finished high school. He's into college. Mm-hmm. And so we're at a very different season. Talk about the season you and I and we are in now.
All right. Okay. This is a very fun season as well, just different. Our 4 oldest kids have gotten married and have moved off and are starting their own families now. And so we have grandkids that come back to visit, and the kids do too. Mm-hmm. And we're glad for that. We always love that to happen. Yeah. And so just it's very different, very quiet around the house. True. For the most part. True. And pretty fun.
All right. It's a different phase, different season for sure. And so Truett's going to talk more about that later, and I will as well. So Truett, you've grown up, as we talked about, with 4 other kids in the home, a lot of activity going on. What's a favorite memory you have of of your season of growing up when you were younger here in this home.
Yeah.
5 kids.
Yeah. So, instant memory that pops up whenever I think of all 5 of the kids at home. I think about in this very living room right here playing indoor baseball on our hands and knees, hitting the ball and going around the bases and stuff. But the everyday thing you knew that was going to be consistent and you knew was going to be family time was dinner. And at dinner, we'd always have all 7 of us around, usually a home-cooked meal by Mom. Dad comes home from work, and we just, boom, everyone's rushing to the table trying to get the head of the table seat. But that's a memory that really sticks out. A time where you just knew, everyone was together, and that was just a warm feeling and good memories of that time. So
That's good. Well, it's important to know that parenting does happen in seasons. And in the same way God gives us the spring, summer, and the fall and the winter, parenting has seasons in much the same way. There is a springtime of parenting when the baby or babies are very young. We'll call this the nurturing stage or season. From 0 to 2 is that time when mom and baby especially are very close. They're spending lots of time together, and the parents are everything to the child at the time. They are the source of food. They are protection. They are comfort. They are the one who clothes them. They are the one who cleans them. They are everything. The baby doesn't get to do much apart from the parent lovingly caring for them during that time. So there's lots of closeness. There's lots of tenderness. It's the time of new life. It's the time of great love and affection. It's an important time. It's an important season. And there are a lot of things that go with that season that are enjoyable. There can be some challenges, sometimes some sleepless nights. But if you understand it's a season, then you can make it through. And so when ours were very young, it was our parents and others who had to remind us from time to time, this is a season. You'll pass through this, and there'll be another season ahead. Which brings us to what is more like the summer time of parenting. We'll call this the structuring phase, because from 2 to 7 years is the time when children are growing in this love that they've received and affection, but now they're beginning to establish some order to their life. Life is beginning to take on some structure. It's usually during this time that a child will be introduced to school-type settings. They're understanding relationships. It's a time of laughter and joy. Much like summertime, there's a lot of activity, a lot of energy, and it's the time to learn the basics of life. Your children are learning how to tie their shoe and make their bed and do all the basics that are necessary for childhood and life. And so this is that structuring phase, 2 to 7 years. And then about that time, sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later for different children, you enter the next phase, which is this preteen 7 to 11 years. And this is what we might call the interpreting stage or season. Because in this phase, a child is beginning to interpret life around them. They're taking all that they've been taught, all that they've understood, and they're beginning to experience life from their own perspectives now. They're beginning to figure out relationships to friends. They're beginning to experience some peer pressure, perhaps, in the groups that they're in. And they're beginning to ask parents lots of questions. They're trying to interpret life around them. It's at this phase that faith becomes a bit more personal for a child as they begin to ask questions and take some of the terms that they've heard, and they're trying to interpret all those and make those a reality for themselves. It's at this phase or this season also that there can be some body changes, especially in the latter part of this. Puberty begins, and they begin to experience a little change going on. And that affects not only their physical body, but their emotions, hormones, all of that. Life is beginning to change for them. And we might compare this to the autumn or the fall season, where the color of the leaves is beginning to change, temperature in the air is beginning to change, and it's all preparing us for the next season. And so this phase is important. It's a time of transition. Child is about to be introduced to a brand new area of life. They're about to walk into what will prepare them for adulthood. And so this next phase is important. And that next one, from 11 to 18 years, the whole teen year season, we might call the interdependent season or stage. Because in this season, the children are picking up responsibilities, hopefully. parents are teaching those things and they are accepting them. And as they accept responsibility, parents are giving freedoms, and they are learning a lot during this time. Sometime during this phase, you're going to teach your child, or you're going to send them somewhere to learn driver's ed, and they're going to learn how to drive, and you're going to go through this phase of giving them the keys to the car, and you're sitting in the front seat, and then eventually you'll hand them the keys to the car, and you'll be sitting inside. And it's a brand new season. It's a new time, and it's important for them that you hand off and handle this season well. This is what will make them into healthy, strong individuals. And it's at this phase that they will, most likely, if they've had some experience with faith, they will own their faith at this point. They will come up with their own ideas about faith and enter into a relationship with God. And these will be important years. It's important that they have a lot of reassurance during this time. They're asking questions and wondering a lot, even about themselves. And so the parent takes on a different role. Parent goes from teaching everything, holding them accountable for everything, to being in more of a hands-off role, slowly stepping back, giving responsibility, giving privilege, and then taking hands off. This is the important time of year. This is the winter phase of parenting, and it's setting up the child for a brand new spring, for a new season for them. And so it's important that a parent knows how to let go of some things, and things that they have been in the past, a relationship they've had with that child in the past, they have to begin to let go and let them assume some responsibilities. So when you understand these 4 seasons, then you can begin the process of doing what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time, is celebrate and enjoy those seasons. God has designed the seasons not for us to complain about, but to enjoy. And so, sometimes parents, they look at the seasons of life that are coming up, and they dread those. They see them in their children and think, oh no, they're coming up on the terrible 2s, or oh no, we're about to enter the dreaded preteen years. Oh my, I'm not looking forward to the teen years. Well, those are really sad ways to enter into new seasons, because what you think about those seasons will often determine what happens in those seasons. So with joy, we should celebrate each of the seasons, see what God has for us in those seasons, make the most of them. So let's look at some things here that will help us in each of the seasons. The first one I'd say is to celebrate each season. Make the most of those times. If it's the 0 to 2 years, make the most of those times. Yes, you're probably going to lose some sleep. Yes, you're going to do a lot of walking in the hall with your baby, but you're never going to get to hold them the way that you do now. And you're going to set the tone for their lives in terms of affection and closeness. And they will never remember those days. You will, they won't, but it will have a profound impact on them. The affection and closeness that you give them will profoundly affect them in the future, though they will never remember those days happening.
That's true.
So it's important that we celebrate those days. Celebrate each season and memorialize those. Celebrate the milestones. Make a big deal out of birthdays. Make a big deal out of progress along the way, accomplishments that happen, and your relationship. Spend time and enjoy every moment. When your child is 4 and 5 years old, celebrate that. Enjoy that. Spend time with them. Play with them. Don't always be thinking about, well, I can't wait till they're 7, or I can't wait till they're 11, or I can't wait till they're 16. No, stay in the moment, enjoy it, and celebrate and remember all of those moments. And then I'd say to help your child or children enjoy all of those moments as well. Help them think that the moment they're in is the best moment, because they don't have the ability to do what you can do. You can know that there's another season ahead, but they're limited. All they know of is the season they're in, and that's all they have knowledge of. So if you look at the season they're in and are frustrated by it, disappointed by it, can't wait to get out of it, well, guess what they're interpreting? They're interpreting that about themselves. That's how you feel toward them, because they can't comprehend it any bigger than that. So help them celebrate, help them see that you celebrate them in this season and enjoy them and enjoy what God's doing in that season. Now, this is something that Heather has always done well. She's been the one in our family that helps make memories and make events special. So, Heather, how did you come to that place where that was important to you, and why is that so important to you?
Well, that was modeled for me in my home growing up when I was a child. I had a brother and a sister, and my mom and dad, they did very much the same thing, taking lots of pictures and celebrating birthdays and holidays and events. So I just carried that on into our family, and I love doing that.
Okay. Yeah. So, Truett, when you think back on family events and milestones and celebrations, what comes to your mind? What's your memory of those things in our home?
Yeah, so first memories usually are, or first thing that's come to mind whenever I think of milestones, every birthday we would typically get out all sorts of home movies and we'd watch, classic family events that occur. We watch them every year, just making a big deal about taking the next step into life and what that looks like, and opening our eyes to that we're going to have more experiences ahead every year. And so milestones also, so that's birthdays, and that's just turning into that new season of turning 13, becoming a teenager, growing older, graduating high school, getting your driver's license. Those were all big things. And so we always had a big event surrounding them, and all holidays and stuff. We just tried to make big events, and it made you want to look forward to the next thing. That way, if you're ever in a down season, you're looking forward to the next event that's to come, and that there's going to be another fun time ahead and more family time spent together. And so that was something I always looked forward to, was the next birthday or the next event.
That's good. So celebrating every season, in each season, is important, making the most of that time while you're in it. The second thing I'd say is try to see parenting as an unending process. Now, let me explain that for just a moment. Sometimes as we're parenting, we tend to think in terms of just the events or the battles you have to fight along the way, things we have to win at or accomplish, or we just have to make it from milestone to milestone. Those are part of what happens, but parenting is a much longer process. Seasons happen within a year, and seasons happen in repeating years. But if you understand that there are sometimes longer eras or seasons, then you get a better perspective on the long game. So it's important to see parenting in that process and not get stuck in a specific season or even in the latest victory you've been through or the latest failure. Truett played football in school, and so I played backyard football growing up. That was about all I did. So I got to hear.
I did not play football.
No. I got to hear him talk a lot of football, and one of the things I'd hear him say, and we would talk about, is when you're playing football, and you come upon a moment when it's 2nd down and 15, and you go for a long pass, and the pass is incomplete. And all of a sudden it's 3rd down, 15. You can't get discouraged that you missed the pass. You've got to pick up and move on. You've got to get to 3rd down. And even if you try a run on 3rd down and you still come up short and you have to punt on 4th down, you can't let that moment destroy your view of their game. You can't let that moment make you feel like, well, that's it. I can't play football. I'm no good at this. Parenting is a process that's a long game process. And so you have to think of it as this unending process. It had a beginning, and it really doesn't have an end. You might think that when the day they get married or the day they turn 18, that it ends. It just turns into another season is what happens. Yeah. So if you get a perspective that says, all right, this is a long game event, a very long game, then you don't get weighed down when all of a sudden you have the moment where you really did blow it, where you messed up and you think, why did I do that? Mm-hmm. There's a moment there. You You repent of that, you change, you move on. You get onto third down and you run the play again. You keep running the play. You try not to get overly stressed in the moment because that moment didn't turn out like you wanted. If you get stuck thinking like that, thinking like, well, my child has to be perfect for this, for the K-5 graduation, or for junior high, or for the middle school banquet, or for whatever. Their grades have to be perfect, and you measure all of a sudden your success as a parent and their success as a child by their 7th grade report card. If that all of a sudden becomes the epic moment where you define your life and their life, you may be discouraged, but you shouldn't be. That is just a single moment. We're in this for a much longer process. If you get caught up in that, you'll find yourself just absolutely emotionally worn out because you'll be spent because you've invested everything into that moment, which may or may not have turned out like you wanted. Then you also find yourself being what I might refer to as just being extra all the time. You're extra sensitive, you're extra stressed, you're extra demanding, you're extra expecting them to do everything just right because your reputation is on the line for this moment, or their success as a person is all of a sudden weighed by their 10th grade science fair project. You've got to get a much longer game perspective in mind here, that it's not all about that one thing. That perspective can really damage your view of yourself as a parent and cause you to really be frustrated with your children, with yourself, and find it even difficult to want to walk into faith at that moment and experience life with other believers, all those kind of things. So, Heather, we, of course, 5 kids, a lot going on. We weren't always perfect. We had some moments where we were extra.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
So when would you say maybe it was hard to remember that this is a process, this is a much longer game? How did we walk through that and not get stuck in any singular moment?
Well, I think it's easy to let comparison. I know we've talked about that in the weeks before about how you're going to be perceived, and that I don't even know what I'm trying to say here.
Well, that if you compare yourself with other parents at that phase or children at that phase, then you can put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yes, and you can get stuck in that. That's where I was going with.
Yeah.
And you do get you can't see ahead. And I think one of the things, and we did have our parents come alongside us and encourage us and help us to get past that. But one thing, as we got older and a little more experienced, I think I was able to start seeing it more actually from the kids' perspective of how difficult and challenging it really is to grow up, because they don't have that sense of that. Well, they can't see past where they haven't been. And I think that was the benefit of our younger kids, because we were able to have a greater understanding to help them when they were so frustrated or upset, that we could understand that and be able to communicate with them. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. I know you can't see that now, but it will be better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, parenting is challenging, and growing up and being parented can be challenging.
Yes.
And so Truett got the benefit of some years of experience where we had practiced on 4 others before we came to him. So being able to remember this is a process. Don't throw all your chips into this one moment and feel like my worth is on the line as a parent when they're 7, or 13. This is it right here. No, it's an ongoing process. And it's important to remember that God works in process in our life. When I think about how He parents me, then I get a little bit of relief and peace in my life, because He, though He saved me in a singular moment. I was born again at a certain time. He then began a process in me of changing me. Yeah. I wasn't made perfect here in this life. The moment I was saved, he justified me. Yeah. We're going to use some doctrinal terms here. I was justified, but then he begins a process of sanctifying me. Yeah. I experienced salvation, but then he begins a process of transformation in my life. And there's this incremental, one step at a time, awareness that I have of him in my life and his work in my life. And this is how he works in me. And this is how he works in me. Then that ought to be how I parent my children, and not expect them at any given moment to be perfect, but to understand where they are, encourage them in that moment, show them great love and affection for where they are in that moment. Don't expect your child who's 6 to know things that a 12-year-old will know. Love them as a 6-year-old.
That's right.
They're going to make mistakes. They're going to break things. They're going to drop things. They're going to disobey from time to time. There's a time to discipline, but what they need is the love that a 6-year-old needs. Yeah. They need what they need at that phase, that season in their life. So know that God works in process in our life. And then another truth from Scripture that encourages me is to know that Jesus himself understood process. When he taught the disciples, he knew they were a work in progress. And he didn't stop at any moment and say, "That's it, I'm done with you." He didn't walk away from them. He didn't even evaluate his own worth based on their progress. Yeah. He understood who he was and what he was doing. And then even more profoundly, you have this passage in John 16 where Jesus says this. He says, "I still have many things to say to you. There's more I want to do, say to you, teach you." He says, "But you cannot bear them now." Mm-hmm. He understood process. Yeah. And he was okay with where they were and who he was where they were. Then he went on and said, "However, when he, the Spirit of truth, has come," he's referring to the Holy Spirit, "he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will tell you things to come." Jesus himself said, there's going to be someone else who's going to come and teach you more things. I won't be the only teacher you're going to have. And he was okay with that. As parents, we have to be okay with process and understand we have a role. We have a time in this season, but it's not all on us. God is also teaching. God is also at work in them. And this is helpful in the process. So we mentioned earlier that for us, this is home for us, the three of us. Mm-hmm. It's a very different experience for Heather and I, and for Truett. We've never had one-on-one time with any of our children at home while they were adults. So it's a brand new season for us. And Truett, what would you say is unique about this season of life in our home?
Yeah, so something unique. One time Papa said this saying. He said, he was talking to me, he said, while all your other siblings have the house, or have the spouse, you have the house. So speaking of here, yes. This is my house that I live with my parents. Yeah. But something unique in this season for me is being able to go to all my siblings and see them as parents and see them as a married couple, and getting to talk to them and get advice from them as to like how they went through things in their life and what they expect for the future and their kids, and then I get to talk to my parents about what I should want from my life, and just having more adult, like mature, understanding conversations with them over what I want to see in life and how things have gone in the past, and then going to each of my siblings' houses too and their spouses and getting to talk to them and have more of a personal relationship. That's not something that my other siblings got to have exactly, was having a lot of basically close friends that they were able to talk to and get information and wisdom from, in the sense of like just being older. And so that's something unique to this season for me right now.
It's good. It's good. And all this is toward this end goal that we started our whole series with, that our goal as parents is to win the heart of our children, to love God, to love us, and to love others. Yeah. So in the process, you want to work toward that end. And you remember, this is an unending process. And just because they haven't achieved it at 11 years old is okay. You still have time to go. There's a lot to happen. So our next point ties in with that. And it is the reminder that we should parent well in the transitions. So a couple different ways that happens. Life is filled with transitions. Seasons come, seasons go, and seasons have transitions. We're in Texas right now. We're in this awkward transition between winter and spring. Spring's trying to come, but it's not here fully yet. And so life comes at us with transitions. Sometimes there's small transitions, and there's a lot of them. For example, you have events, going to school, going to church, there's graduations, and there's birthdays and celebrations and events. And there's a lot of in-between time. There's a lot of driving to school, driving home from school, driving to the store, driving to sporting events. There's a lot of time preparing meals at home, cleaning up after meals at home. There's a lot of time just being at home, not having anything to do at home. Maybe we're reading, maybe we're talking, maybe we're playing a game. We're just in between times. There's a lot of in between time. And believe it or not, what happens in the in between times really sets the tone for the big times.
Yeah.
It's important we make the most of the in-between times. Those conversations that happen spontaneously. The car ride to the store, when all of a sudden the conversation you have hoped and prayed would come up, comes up. Or your child asks you a question that you hadn't expected, and they felt the comfort to do that because you created a moment. You were aware, you're always aware of those moments happen, the in-between times. Make the most of those in-between times. Make the most of those because they really do, they set the stage and they determine far more about our relationship than you realize. Those are the times that your children, they're listening and they're learning and they're watching to see what mom and dad are really like. What are they like in those moments just around the house? Those will determine their perspective and their ability to want to come to you, be with you, love you, ask a question about faith, ask a question about life. So there are some small in-between times, but there are also some big in-between times. There are some transitions between preteen to teen years. That's a big transition as your child is experiencing something different internally. They're experiencing some different things in their body. They're experiencing some different things in their own emotions and mind and heart. All of that is changing for them, and they need help in that transition process to get to the next season, to walk into it. And so in the same way that in sports, transitions are important. If you're playing football, the handoff from the quarterback to the running back is important. That's a transition. Getting the ball to him in that moment is important. If you're running a relay race, getting the baton from one runner to the next runner is important. The race hinges on that moment. Being able to handle transitions well is important from one phase to the next. Now, for me personally, I got real emotionally invested in each of the seasons of our kids' life. And I struggled going from one season to the next. It was always an emotional thing for me to see, one of the children graduated from K-5 and going into elementary, and then, from elementary into junior high, and then into high school, and then high school graduation. I'm just an emotional mess, walking through all of that because I'm not one to let go of it. There's so many great things that happen for me personally. I didn't want to let go of that moment. So I had to really work to let go of some old things and transition into new and see that as a positive thing. So now Heather handled it differently. and she walked through it in a different way than I did. How'd you feel like you handled some of the transitions of parenting or childhood for our kids? What helped in that process, or what made it difficult at times?
I really enjoyed each one, and as I could see that phase coming to an end, I didn't get sad as much as I just was looking forward to the next phase. I was so excited as I was watching them grow and change so much. So I didn't have there were some things that, I would be a little emotional about, but that's not that really isn't just who I am. But I know one of the big transitions that we would do with all of our children when they hit the preteen phase was we took them out on a weekend trip and made it very, very special. We went overnight to a hotel and made it very unique for each one of the kids. In different things that we would take them. I think we took one of them to a Star Wars museum or something. And anyway, that was very fun. But we also talked about what was coming up ahead for them, peer pressure and dating and some big issues that we knew that they were going to be facing. And we wanted to catch it before, they were in it. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. And then I think when the boys turned 16, you took them to do something very unique and special with them. And so that was another big transition moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We found those to be helpful because they put us both on the same side with our kids. Yeah. We're both walking into a new season, and we're for you. We're with you. It's new. We're going to grow together in this. Here's some things you can anticipate, but this will be new for us as well, so let's walk together. And we found those to be helpful. So I'd say parent well in the transition. Make the most of those. Don't despise those. Don't be frustrated by them. Celebrate those. Make the most of them. Make milestone memories out of those. And then I'd say parent with peace. Parent especially with the peace of God. Psalm 23 is a very familiar psalm to many people, and it speaks there about the importance of peace that the shepherd provides. Just the first couple of verses there, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Now, the psalm goes on. It's rich and beautiful and filled with truth for us. But one of the things we see there is the wise shepherd providing a place of peace so that the sheep are free to lie down without fear, without tension, without conflict. When sheep are in distress, they can't eat. They can't digest their food properly. So a shepherd knows, I have to get them to a place where they feel secure and protected and safe, where there is peace. The same is true for children. As they are taking in life and learning, and you're working toward this goal of winning their heart to love God, winning their heart to love you, and winning their heart to love others, it needs to happen in an environment of peace. This is how they learn. This is how they process. And they can't do that if it's an environment filled with tension and conflict and anger and frustration. So one of the things that we have to do in each season is seek to keep peace. Learn that this is how we learn. This is how they process. And some things that we've had to remind ourselves through this process is that God is bigger than the current circumstances. Sometimes you get into the midst of an issue, and there will be issues in parenting. There'll be struggles. There'll be situations you don't have the answers for. We've had to remind ourselves as parents, God is bigger than this circumstance. and God is with us in this circumstance. That alone can help bring peace. He's with me, and He's bigger than this. And He's working in us in process as well. He is teaching us, He is training us, and He's doing the same in our children. He's also working in their life. When we remember that, it helps settle us. When we could pray for our children and know God heard us and knew God was working for us and on our behalf and in us, that brought peace. That gave us the ability to relax, settle down, and not be stressed, overly stressed, not be filled with anxiety all the time, and not resort to some lesser parenting models. When you don't have peace and you feel like the pressure's on and I've got to win this moment and I've got to be perfect and everything's on me, my whole worth as a person and my worth as a parent is all wrapped up in this one moment here, then all of a sudden you end up resorting to some pretty negative approaches. You go to yelling. Yeah. You get to the point where you raise your voice, you let go of your self-control, and you think, well, I've got to control this moment. I've got to make my point. I've got to win this battle. So you resort to yelling, or you resort to threatening. You start making all these threats to your kids, or your anger just is out of control. When that happens, peace leaves the room. It's not present anymore. And it's sad because the very thing you're wanting to have happen, your child learn and your child obey, you're complicating it with what you're creating. In creating environments of tension and conflict and frustration, you're not helping them have a desire to obey. And then one of the other things that parents use as a go-to is shaming. And this is an easy go-to. It's one of those things where you start saying things like, what planet are you from anyway? Well, I don't know where you came from. I sure would have never done that as a kid. And boy, do you realize what you've done to us? Whose child are you anyway? All those kind of statements, they're just flying off our tongue, rapid fire in a moment like that. But all of those say to a child, I don't know where you came from. All of those to a child say, you don't have worth. Yeah. All of those to a child are hurtful. And they don't produce the very thing you're wanting to produce, a heart that will love you and obey. So bringing peace into the situation is what's needed. Bringing resolve, not using guilt and shaming and anger and silent treatment, all those kind of things, those frustrate the situation more than help the situation. Yeah. So Truett would honestly say, as any of our kids would, that there were times that there wasn't peace in our home. There were times when there was tension, when there was conflict, and that has a different effect on everybody. So, Truett, what was it like for you when there was tension in our home?
Yeah. So I am and have always been someone who's very sensitive to tension. It's very oppressive to me, especially I want to just get it over with first and just cut it off as soon as possible and get to where there's peace. That way people can just live comfortably together. So whenever there were times of tension, it made dinner time not enjoyable. It made it to where kids are, we're going to our rooms, we're not talking to each other, we're not hanging out and just collaborating. And it was always a very frustrating time to me, and just I felt like I was being compressed and just I couldn't function like I wanted to, and I couldn't just go up to anyone and just have a fun with any of them, because if there was tension between the groups. So I remember that even within the kids, within if there's tension between us, or if there's tension between the other kids and y'all, it was just always a very hard thing to deal with, and I didn't know what steps to take, especially at a younger age. Now, thankfully, having gone through more of that, we know how to resolve tension. But
So what about when there were times of peace, however?
Yeah.
What difference did that make for you?
So obviously, in times of peace, it's a lot easier to just have fun, like come in here and just play indoor baseball or whatever, or go outside and go explore in the bamboo, or there's all sorts of stuff that whenever there's peace, it just makes for good memories. It's just a great connection between all the kids and the parents and stuff. So like peace is essential for even between the kids and between the kids and the parents, I think. Yeah. And whatever the parents model is going to be seen throughout the kids. So if there was ever tension between y'all, we would feel it and see it between the own kids. And so whenever there was peace with y'all, it made us want to have peace with each other as well.
I do remember when Truett was pretty young, 7 or 8. Were you sharing a phone with Hunter? How old were you when you were?
Yeah, probably something.
Anyway, he's pretty young, and there was tension between us, me and his daddy, and it just crushes him. And I remember him sending me a text at just such a young age, and just basically saying, y'all need to work this out so everything can be happy again. And that's really what did it. It was like, okay, you're right. And so I still remember that, and I appreciated that sensitivity. Saw him as a peacemaker then.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Peace is so important in the process of parenting. So parents, do what you can to keep peace between mom and dad. Keep peace in how you relate in the home, the way you communicate, the volume that you communicate, that the tone of voice that you use. Make sure that it communicates a spirit of peace, that there is love and acceptance and comfort. This will be a great umbrella for your children that will give them a sense of security and comfort and will help them be at peace as well. Finally, tonight, I'd say parent with a complete dependence on God.
Yes.
I know from the beginning of our series, I've said our goal is to win the heart of our children to love God, to love you as parents, and then to love others. Here's some startling news. That is an impossible task. Mm-hmm. You cannot change your children. You cannot change their heart. You cannot win their heart. Those are only things that God can do. So when you come upon that moment of impossibility, that is your moment to cry out to God and say, God, I can't do this. And that'll be the greatest step you've ever taken. Mm-hmm. And it'll happen again and again and again in each season. And that is your success. When you admit to God, I can't do this. And you cry out for wisdom, you cry out for strength, and you cry out for direction. In that moment, He will show up. He will work. And He will answer your prayer, and He will be the one who changes your child. So let your trust be in Him, not in yourself, not in your ability as a parent or as a person. It's not about you. You're only joining Him in the work that He is about.
That's right.
Jesus said in John 15, He said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Yeah. So in parenting, the reality is, as parents, you can do nothing. But as He abides in you and you let Him flow through you, you will see much fruit. You will see the hearts of your children changed. You'll see the hearts of your children won to love Him, love you, and love others. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I'm looking forward to next week as we talk about discipline. And how do you discipline in such a way that it affects the heart? Not just the outward behavior, but the inward heart. We'll talk about that next week. So thanks again so much for being here tonight, and we'll see you next week.